y'all. We planned to do our own little mini introductions, but we didn't. But since we already did those, we can skip ahead. I'm just gonna tell y'all a little bit about some of the agenda so people know what the flow is gonna be like. Um, we want to leave some room for like some interaction and not just like straight lecture, although there will be a lot of material to hear and learn from. So we're going to start off with an interactive exercise um, and then, or activity, and then get into some of the history of Mama Fun, some of the information around like how to, behind the scenes, how we ran the thing. And then we're going to take a little bit of time to have a discussion question where we want like hopefully everyone to with a prompt for everyone to share some thoughts. And then we're going to get a little bit more into the time banking and how that works, and our kind of like reflections on care work and building non-extractive kind of infrastructure. And then we're going to like allow people to have open Q&A, where everyone can share their questions in the chat or just come off mute and we can discuss a little bit more. That's going to be the flow. I'm going to give it to Darlie so they can start the activity.
Hi everyone. So we'll start off with a relatively, hopefully not too hard activity. I will share my screen. First I will put the info in the chat. And everyone see, wait, let me see. Can everybody see this screen? Okay, great. Great. We're gonna start off with just a little bit of a reflective exercise. So I want you to think about the last time you had to deal with something difficult, and this can be something big or something small. It can be like a minor inconvenience in your day or like a very life-altering moment. And think about which kinds of resources, which people, which organizations, like which parts of your community, what places, maybe online resources that you turned to that helped you through this moment. And just submit that to the poll. So you should be able to access it by just going to this website. I put the link in the chat and then you put in the code. And just share 2 to 3 resources. You can share more, of course, like the more the better, that you turn to during this time. Let me see if I can. Okay, perfect. And I'll just give about 2 to 3 minutes for folks to think about this. And then we can talk a little bit more. Okay, I see quite a number of different responses coming and a little bit of a theme emerging. Just gonna give folks a little bit more time to keep adding. Okay, I'm seeing quite a number of responses, which is awesome to see. Feel free to keep adding some more. I'm going to see if this little feature actually works out. So let's find out if we can categorize some of these different themes. Okay, awesome. So I think across these different resources that people are relying on, we see a lot on friends and chosen family, where people are turning to close friends, professors, lovers, mutual aid on social media. We also see some categories around neighbors and community, turning to people who are in direct proximity to you. Seeing some nature, which is interesting, and mutual aid and also faith and spiritual circles. Does anyone want to talk a little bit about what they submitted or what you think you're seeing among these different responses? Just feel free to raise your hand. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if people are putting stuff in there.
Yeah, I
Oh,
was just gonna say, James put in the chat, I'll turn my camera on so I'm talking. Leaning on community instead of government, something James put in the chat.
yeah, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I agree with that. Like a lot of these moments that we're turning to people, we're not turning necessarily to like formal institutions, but the people who are around us. And then for the next prompt, I want you to also think about these moments and how did people actually help you within those moments? Um, it should have automatically updated the prompt. So if there's an issue with that, please let me know. Okay, giving a little bit a minute more for folks to keep adding. But this is really awesome to see kind of the different ways that people are able to get support from their community members. Feel free to also unmute and just share a little bit about your experience if you're willing to. Okay, it looks like we have quite a number of submissions. This is really cool to see people sharing listening ear, presence, solidarity, transportation, accountability, some legal advice, food. We also see some laundry and some financial support also across these different answers. Is there anything that's coming up for you as you look at this list?
James put in the chat presence.
Presence?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, can you please explain that a little bit?
Presence. Presence. Not
Mm,
like this, but like presence. And Kamaria put in the chat material and non-material offers.
yeah.
And I want a plus one that I was going to say tangible and intangible.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your reflections. I agree, like what we see here is a lot of the times people are able to res turn to people for like emotional and social needs, but also tangible needs. And a lot of the kinds of exchanges and ways that we support each other don't often include money, actually, or more formal modes of transactions. So some of the work that we are trying to do as Mama Fund is thinking about how community members already do such innovative, interesting ways of meeting their needs by relying on each other and interdepending on each other. And how can we support more of those kinds of transactions and relationship building, more importantly, within people that allow them to meet each other's needs? And so for this presentation, we'll be talking a little bit about some of the work that we have been doing and some of the strategies and challenges that come with doing this kind of work within communities. So I'll hand it over to, I think, Carissa, and we can talk a little bit more specifically about Mama Fund. But thanks so much for your reflections on this.
Hey everybody, I'm going to share my screen and just speak briefly and then pass it on. I also cannot see the chat when I'm sharing, so if someone has a question or just please, someone let me know if there's something going on in the chat that I don't see. Share properly. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we're Metro Atlanta Mutual Aid Fund, Mama Fund, or sometimes people call us Mama, but Mama Fund we usually say. Um, and Darlie just led us through this activity, which is quite related to how we started. We started during COVID, and Tamika Middleton, which some of you may know, I call her an Atlanta organizer, but she's really just an organizer and does a lot of stuff in the South. During COVID, she started a social media group when we were all like on lockdown and couldn't see each other, and people were really sharing their offers and their needs, whether it was transportation, childcare, food, medicine, water, whatever it was, housing, people were just directly sharing what they needed in this social media group. And then one day she put this post up because obviously a lot of people needed money, recognizing that there will be at least a short-term economic impact. Are there folks organizing or interested in a community loan fund or SUSU situation? This is like the exact post that was in the social media group. If you are in that group, you can still find it today. And so several people responded to this post and this call for action is how Mama Fund started. There was no Mama Fund, there was no money. It was just people like, what can we do for each other? Um, these are some of the people who continued on the calls, on the organizing calls. Some came from different organizations, some were just individuals. Even though we are like the face of Mama Fund was truly built on like community giving, community offers. So a lot of people who weren't able to attend the meetings, they still did things like share on social media or talk to their networks or give what they could or just gave us advice or talk to us about their organizational work. So this is truly a community-based organization. Oh, let me check my timer so I don't go over time. One of the things that we did was come up with grounding principles. Um, we started as a collective. We continue as a collective. We are pro-Black, anti-white supremacists, anti-capitalist, Black feminists. We center the most vulnerable, and we use an intersectional oppression analysis to just figure out what groups are we prioritizing. So before we figured out what we were going to be doing, we did think, okay, we need to think about people surviving domestic violence or formerly incarcerated or working class or trans, queer, non-binary. Who is being impacted before COVID? Who was being impacted, in a weighted way? Whatever we were doing was going to be driven by community, not donors, and we believe in mutual aid, wealth redistribution. Oh, I can't talk. Wealth redistribution and building alternatives. So we knew that we need to do something fast, but we also needed to do something long term and sustainable. Here I'm going to talk a little bit, even though I'm going to talk about the needs that we saw, I'm going to talk about building out a fund. So we all saw reduced income. These are just a few of the needs that we saw. People didn't have a way to stock up on food. A lot of people during COVID, they wanted to fill up their refrigerators and pantries, but a lot of us were living check to check and didn't have grocery money for that week. So how can you fill up for a month? Then, evictions, no fund to relocate, or already living in dangerous homes. So these are just a handful of the needs that we would bring back to the group from our communities, our neighbors, our family, our friends, the social media group, or whoever we're talking to. It was during these early conversations that we tried to figure out, well, how can we help? And we brainstormed ideas. How can we help ourselves? How can we resource ourselves? And how can we get as many people involved as possible? And so after brainstorming, that's how we came up with a mutual aid fund, like a rapid response mutual aid fund, and then a longer term time bank. So although the time bank came later in our work, it was always like one of the initial ideas. Again, we had no money, but because the need was there, the need was present, and the need was visible, many people, wanted to help. To this day, we still get donations of like $3, $5. Since we started, we've collected and redistributed about $1 million, and more than half of those came from really small donations. A lot of it was just direct language and also kind of adaptive communication. When I say direct language, we would literally take anonymously, like if a family said, my car needs repairing, I need $680. We would say a family of four needs their car repaired for $680. Can you help? And so we had like a comms team and a finance and fundraising team and, create a graphic and just kind of put it out there. And I think these stories were so relatable and so real and a way for people to kind of help immediately. People began to give. We also had a solidarity committee. This was like a committee of white people who also believed in like wealth redistribution. And although we prioritized BIPOC people in Atlanta, we took money from whoever. No, well, Nia will get to that later. We didn't take money from everybody, but I'll just say it was a collective effort. Um, I also always, even though this wasn't planned, during that time, there was a lot of different situations going on, protests going on. And as the protesters were going on after like the George Floyd murder and some other tragedies, people wanted to give to organizations that were really connected to the directly impacted. So that was also a way that we didn't intentionally raise more money, but we intentionally like kind of upped our work to give harder. Um, we also were another thing that we didn't intend to do. We had a little like a blurb in Rolling Stone. I think people were just really attracted to the very basic, straightforward, direct, like bold giving. And it really was like a neighbor to neighbor task. Again, most of our donations were like $30, 25, $5, and we really tried to create a low barrier application process as well. So I'm going to wrap this up. For our application process, we really tried to think, how can we reach people easily? We didn't ask for a lot of information. The application was like no strings attached. Multiple people in the same household could apply for funds. You could apply multiple times. You didn't have to send your ID or send your bills or send anything like that. We would talk to people on the phone if they were unable to like fill out the online application. We had translators. We really just tried to figure out, how can we make this as easy as possible. We gave through like PayPal, Zelle, or checks when we could, but we tried to just make it seamless, easy, and just stress-free, because there was always already so much going on. Um, I'm sorry, I can't move my slide for some reason. Okay, I'm gonna pass it on to Nia.
Thanks, Carissa. So Carissa already mentioned a little bit about when it came to donations. A lot of donations came from individuals within our community who were looking to redistribute funds, especially during COVID. But also, like was said as well, we were getting a lot of larger either foundations or corporate entities who are also interested in trying to get funds out, especially during COVID, especially at the start of COVID. So we very early on as a collective realized that we wanted to make sure that we were still in alignment as a collective and within our community of accepting funds from organizations and foundations that aligned with us as best that they could. And so we ended up coming up with this kind of fundraising flow chart. And um, for the most part, if it was an individual, like it was very kind of straightforward that if it was like less than $2,000, if they were looking to form a relationship with us, and of course we will take funds from them. But if it was a larger donation, like over $2,000, if it was from a corporate entity, we had a couple questions that we wanted to make sure that we asked ourselves and within the collective to make sure that it was funding that we could accept for our community. So a couple of the big things that we wanted to make sure that we took note of is if it's a prominent figure, are they interested in forming long-term relationships with us? Do they have a negative impact on the community? And if certain times, if it was yes or no, then we understand that either yes, if they're looking to form a relationship with us, if they have a good standing within the community, then we can either set up a conversation to learn more about them and learn more about their rationale behind the funding. And then if that worked out, then of course we can set funds for them. But if not, if it did not feel aligned to us in our community, we have turned down funds. When we have turned down funds, a couple of things that we have taken into consideration. One is that if there is extensive reporting that we have to do for to receive funds, especially if that includes like sharing out information and data from those within our community who have received funds for us or will receive funds from us, then we are likely to turn down funding from them. As well as if it is a situation where they have millions of dollars, but they are looking to redistribute into other communities and not redistribute to their actual employees within their companies. Those are things that we want to take in consideration too. And lots of times when things like that came up, that's when we would set up a convo and have a conversation to understand. We will also set up a conversation or at least approach our organization to set up a conversation and let them know why we are turning down funds. One thing to note is that when we are doing making decisions like this, we're making them as a collective, and we all need to be able to reach quorum in order this for this decision to be binding. So if it wasn't quorum or things like that, we either need to have further conversations as a collective. We need to do more research together to kind of figure out if this is something that we can look more towards or not. Because that's also a conversation that we have to have around like we are turning down money that could in effective terms like benefit our community, but will it actually benefit our community if this is just money that's not forming an actual relationship that would be longstanding if the reasoning behind why this organization is giving funds does not fit and align to our values? So those are things that we just had to really take in consideration. And when that happens, then that's when we call upon other organizations or we try to reach back out to our individual donors as a way to kind of hopefully reignite and receive more donations that way. So next slide, Carissa. So Carissa already mentioned this. So within the first couple of weeks after the pandemic, we redistributed about $44,000 in urgent funds to about 75 families, about 300 BIPOC folks in total, and have distributed over time around $1 million in the funds. And one thing to really note is that we knew that once this pandemic ended, that the needs wouldn't stop. So very early on in the formation of Mama Fund, we had this conversation around time banking and how can we make sure that while we are looking to have rapid response to our community right now, what is the thing that we can be doing to make sure it is actual sustainable and alternative forms of economic growth with otherwise. So that's what we really started to think about and try to start really forming, especially post the pandemic, especially as things within the government changed about how money can be distributed. We had to take all those things in consideration to be able to best protect those who we are wanting to give funds to and those who give us funds as well to redistribute. And so we have been thinking about that and kind of forming that over the past couple of years to make this something that is sustainable for our community, but also know that people still have needs to this day. Like still, we will get emails weekly of people asking and needing funds, whether that's through email, on social media. So we know that there is still a great need. Like people are still recovering and things constantly happen within the country that they need rapid response for. So we still try to put aside funds strictly for mutual aid distribution for rapid response funding. All of the donations that we still receive, those go straight to that rapid response funding. So it's just one way that we try to make sure that we're still like answering a need while trying to build something more sustainable. So I believe I am passing it back to Darlie to talk a little bit more and have a little bit more of a discussion from there.
Yeah, so based on this discussion, thanks Nia and Carissa. I wanted us to do a little quick reflection on how you think mutually transforms the way that you relate with other members of your community. So with thinking within your own personal lives, we started off thinking about how other people have supported us. And in similar ways, I'm sure we've also supported other people. So thinking about that as a form of mutual aid, how do you think that it transforms the way that you relate with the different people that make up your community or chosen family? And feel free to unmute or put in the chat. Either is work.
Well, I was starting to write in the chat, but just so that we have some live air, so to speak. What I was starting to write was I try to do my part in return to provide particularly no strings attached support,
Mm,
uh, monetary support when I learn of needs that arise with regards to people in my orbit, whether or not it's a person that's close to me or a person that's farther out.
mm,
Um, I don't necessarily do so well yet with a non-monetary piece. That I would say is more reserved for people who are closer to me.
mm. Thank you for sharing, Nia. Anyone else want to add?
Tamashi wrote something in the chat. Tamashi, do you want to say it out loud or have someone read it?
I think Tamashi had to leave.
Oh, okay, that's what she said. Gotcha. Okay.
I can share something just to stimulate the discussion. For me, mutual aid has kind of changed the way I think about how I get my needs met within like community instead of immediately thinking of buying something. Um, it kind of has like given me a little bit of a brain of like who has what, who's connected to what org. Oh, I need chairs for this event. Oh, I got to remember this person's name, or I need this thing. And that has like given me a little bit more of maybe like an awareness of who's in the community and what people are doing, as well as a connection to them that's more than just like what they can offer, because then I get to learn like what they're doing and they get to learn what I'm doing and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Um, I see Donna expressing that a lot of your friends have time needs and balancing resources and capacity is difficult. This is definitely very important and a part of like the kinds of things that we need to consider as community members in terms of what do you have to offer and can you genuinely hold space for some people's needs? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay. But I am curious to see how you individually also manage this kind of tension between wanting to be present and also give to the community while also being honest about what your capacity is.
I have to say, I'm learning about this, and I think being a part of Ujima, especially this past year, has been really helpful because I don't think I thought about it that much. And, with the way things are changing, and my community, my circle I'm an older person, so my circle has gotten smaller and more needy in some ways. So it's I don't have as much energy as I used to. So it's real. I'm learning. I mean, at least I'm learning that you have to really think about this and really uh hopefully have people to help you think about it because I think it's hard to think about by yourself.
Mm, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Nana. Definitely agree with that. I also see Justin shared that it allows you to be in the right relationships and in true kinship and avoiding saviorism. If you don't mind, could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think particularly in the South, um, there can be a lot of philanthropic giving. There can be a lot of folks that want to give towards causes, and you know, mutual aid requires you to put more skin in the game than just the financial resources that you have, and it makes you one aware of others' needs, but it then makes you aware of your own needs. Um, and so it builds a reciprocity. So right now, to me, when I see uh, a lot of giving, it often happens in a saviorism mode, where folks are like, "Oh, I want to feel better, so I'm giving money to do better," or "I want to do better so that I can feel better," right? But it doesn't mean that you actually even know who the people are and why it's even worth giving. And the reality is, um, like for me, it folks say who dive into this work that the work transforms you, but I don't think that you can really be transformed, right, unless you let yourself be in right relationship with others, because then that's when you feel a reciprocity and you actually reflect. And so mutual aid for me has created a space for me to deeply reflect on my own self, my own lived experience, and gotten me clear around what it means for me to give and be in community and be clear around my own boundaries, so that I'm still loving myself, because it can be very easy to overgive as well. So a part of the reciprocity is you being in right relationship and telling somebody like, I'm actually spent, or I'm at a space where I can't. And then if you're in right relationship, you receive back. And so it's this flow and exchange that keeps happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
So
for that, Justin. That was absolutely amazing. I
yes,
think a lot
ma'am.
of people really resonate with these ideas because these are the things that we have to think about every day in our personal relationships. And then also as community members who are trying to kind of interact and support each other at different spaces. I'm curious to see if there's any other folks who kind of resonated with this message. If there's any thoughts that you have that you'd like to also share around this. I saw a lot of hearts, so I know at least a couple people do. Okay, Shasha, I see you shared about how mutual aid opens up the possibility for disappointment, but also helps you know who you can count on. Do you mind talking a little bit more about that? That's really interesting.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I think that when you're trying to be like self-sufficient and do everything on your own, or only really relying on like institutional help, I guess, you don't really build any kind of trust with the people around you, because you're not really letting them help you. So you
Mm,
don't really know who can step up, who can't.
mm,
And in the process of figuring out the answers to those questions, you're gonna be disappointed in the process. Like it's just kind of inevitable.
mm.
Um, so it is like a lot of like letting go of control and trust, but it's just a part of the process.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I like that you bring that up also, just because it's not like all fun and like flowers and rainbows sometimes. There are moments where being in community with others can also create negative emotions or even kind of end relationships with other members in the community. And so these are all things that are important to also consider as we kind of try to do this work. I will hand over since it's great discussion though. Thanks everyone for contributing to this.
Thank you, Darlie, and thanks y'all for this really interesting reflections. It sounds like a lot of people have spent time thinking about mutual aid and reciprocity already, which is really cool to hear. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we've been doing some time banking, and then I'd be curious to hear your questions and also some reflections on these pieces. So we started transitioning more into time banking in the 2024, which was always the intention from the start, but the funds were also kind of like getting lower, and we wanted to build something that felt more long term rather than just sending out funds that were depleting. So we started our first gatherings specifically around time banking, specifically around non-monetary mutual aid. And we specifically decided to do offers and needs markets, which are a way to kind of do like live time banking, where people are able to share what offers they have to a group of people and write them down, and people are able to share what needs they have, and then people can connect at the event. And the idea was to then move them onto our time bank after, where they can also keep doing the time banking. So we have a platform called Made Open, or on Made Open, for the Mama Fund Time Bank, for people to continue doing time banking, which I'm going to share some more about the challenges of that in a bit. Let's see the next slide. It sounds like a lot of people already know what time banking is, but just a little review. Time banks are a way to meet each other's needs or a community's needs through exchange without relying on monetary transactions. Time banks use hours as the basic measurement of exchange and value all labor equally. So there's an hour for an hour for all the labor, regardless of what kind of labor it is. And time banking is a way to build a lot of what people are talking about: relationships, boundaries, reciprocity, instead of transactional one-off exchanges. So it's not bartering in the sense of like, hey, I have this thing, and I specifically am looking for one person who has the thing I need, so I can give them the thing that they need. The cool thing about time banking is that you can offer an hour of your time to anyone in the time bank, and you can receive an hour or more of time from anyone else in the time bank, making it so that you don't have to necessarily exchange one-on-one with someone and find someone who has exactly the thing that you need. And the idea is just that we're all kind of agreeing to this practice so that you can potentially have a lot of your needs met and everyone can offer a lot of things to different people, and it builds more of like a network rather than just single transactional exchanges. Next slide. Yes, so we have had a few in-person events. We've gotten people into the time bank, and some of our successes has just been simply teaching people and ourselves time banking. We were learning time banking as we're moving along. We're seeing a lot of people learn time banking and redefining how people are getting their needs met without transactional methods. And we've also kind of like noticed that people are taking time banking beyond even our platform and using it as a practice in their families and in their communities. And sometimes even for that reason, it's like hard to even keep track of like the impact of some of the event and the work we do, because it's just a practice that people are continuing on. So we consider that a success, just the idea that people are taking this practice and using it in their lives. We have consistently connected the time bank to the larger solidarity economy and the ways in which time banking can support building an alternative economy, and not just be isolated all by itself. So we've had solidarity economy, like holiday events that included people, included free store or clothes exchanges and co-ops, co-op vendors. So there is some money involved, but just like building more of an ecosystem. Yeah. And then there have been some interesting challenges that have come up with specifically the way we built this time bank. So moving from rapid monetary response to long-term non-monetary mutual aid has been a challenge, especially when you're known as a group who gives out monetary funds to then kind of being clear, like, hey, we're doing an event, come through. People are like, oh, is this where I can get money for this? Is this where I can get money for that? It's like, no, that's not what we're doing this time. Has been kind of an interesting challenge, but I think over time, consistently, I remember we had 2 people come through who received funds early on in one of our events, and that was really special. And they really liked what that like kind of the offers and needs market, and they participated in that. But yeah, we had thousands of people that were supported through the funds, but that didn't necessarily translate to the time bank building, which is okay. I think we just consider it like part of the work of building out the time bank. And then, yeah, we've been trying to figure out how to keep people continuously involved in time banking. So not just the events where people seem to like receive a lot from that, a lot of information, a lot of education, and a lot of just and offer a lot to of themselves and to us and to others. But how do we keep people engaged in kind of more of a maybe like ongoing yearly monthly time bank or something has been kind of like a very big challenge of some of the work we do, as well as mapping out the forms of participation. So people who want to just time bank versus people who would like to be part of the Mama Fund membership and do more engage more in like the questions around mutual aid, the working groups, and some of that work. So those have been some interesting places that we're looking at now. Can do the next slide. Yeah, so this is kind of like very much in alignment with some of the discussion we were having. So I'm very excited to hear more and get also to some Q&A. But just wanted to share some of like the thoughts and reflections that we've developed over time with working with time banking and non-monetary mutual aid, and building alternative non-extractive infrastructure for alternative economies. So a lot of the work that comes through in time banking is care work. So care work being the work which keeps us all alive, and the idea of centering care work is important, and also one of the reasons why we have the hour for hour thing in the time bank. So a lot of times care work is not valued in the labor market, and a lot of times the assumption is like, why would an hour of babysitting equal an hour of mechanic work? But the idea is that those things are equally valuable, and because even more so they're not valued in the labor market equally, we want to have those things be an hour for an hour regardless. Another thing is that time banking is a facilitative tool. So it's not itself an alternative institution. It is a tool for increasing and strengthening our relationships and meeting our needs. I think a few people mentioned like being able to do kind of mutual aid with their like close group of people, but not necessarily expanding beyond that. I think that time banking is a way to build out your mutual aid with a bunch of people who have agreed to participate in this practice. I think that's the strength of it, versus like not really knowing people and not knowing that you have shared values and trying to do it without this like tool as a structure. And I think an important like segue from that is that as a facilitative tool, time banking is not like kind of going back to the bartering. It's not like a way to just replace our transactions using time instead of money. It's like really supposed to be about building out our relationships and our community. So I think that there are ways that, and I've seen that time banking can just become another transactional thing. So I think that's a part of like the facilitation and the agreement of the practice is like we're not just replacing our monetary and transactional ways. We're actually going beyond that to try and build relationships, etc. And then thinking about the how time banking and mutual aid is not new. A lot of people have engaged in mutual aid before they know what that word meant. And even a lot of people sometimes, like we had someone who was like, I don't know what mutual aid is. And then we were like, yes, you do. And we always kind of ask, like, have you ever like given your neighbor something, received help from a cousin? And it's like, okay, well, you've done mutual aid. But I think that a lot of the times the practice of mutual aid is something that we, for better or worse, have forgotten, or need some ways of unlearning more transactional ways of doing things. So I think for that reason, time banking is a useful tool, and a useful way of talking about alternative, non-extractive economies, even though it's still something that a lot of people already do. So I think that the practice itself is something important to engage with as a way of unlearning some of the ways that we've learned to meet our needs. And then time banking is a really good way to just see what resources exist in your community, in your group of friends, in your family, that you might not have like really been able to talk to before. So it's a really powerful facilitative tool, I think.
So we are at time, so I did want to give folks space to ask some questions before we have to transition. Sorry.
No, that sounds good. I was actually about to be like, we can
I
we
felt
can
it
end here, and curious to hear about people's questions.
for sure. So I feel like we probably can get two in. I don't want to push it. But also just, put questions in the chat if you need to, but I want to give space for two questions. Feel free to come off chat and ask your question. Oh, go
Hello.
ahead.
Hi. Um, Looking around to see if there's anybody else that wants to go first. But you talked about learning about time banking together and with other people. I'm curious if you can just talk a little bit about what that learning process looked like or what the education process was.
Oh yeah, I can respond. Basically that meant that like we were learning to time bank at the same time that we were like teaching people to time bank. Like we had to think about a lot of questions about like what does safety look like in time banking? What like just different things like that that we actually hadn't thought about. And also us ourselves, like how do we engage in more time banking? Like kind of realizing like, yeah, we're telling people to time bank, but we don't do it that much type of thing. So it's just like, yeah, we're learning a practice along with everybody else. I don't know if anyone else wants to also.
I'll add to that. Somebody mentioned aging earlier, and we recently had an interesting conversation with this UPenn professor who was doing something on time banking and aging. And something that's personally come up for me, like in mutual aid, is I often share a story about one of my favorite neighbors. She was an older woman who needed to walk in the neighborhood. She had blood clots, and we would walk together, and it was a slow pace for me. So the walking was physical walking part was for her, but for me, I received so much wisdom and support and guidance and parenting and marriage and being a good neighbor and safety. And so, you know, I think she thought that I was helping her, but she just had no clue. You are feeding me every single time. So when I hear, earlier in the conversation, somebody's like, I can be a listening ear. That stuff is so important. It's often something that we don't think about. We think about rides or food, but there's so many things that we can't touch that are just so important. And so for me, like hearing that and implementing it in time banking conversations was uh I knew it, but I didn't know it. So
Thank you. And can I ask a quick follow-up? I am looking around. How did you answer that question? What did safety look like? What answers did you come up with to that question?
We're still coming up with answers to that question. I think that one of the threads or that we were thinking about was like we talked to I don't know if y'all know Julian Hill, Solidarity Economy lawyer. He has a clinic, and we talked to some lawyers in that clinic, and they told us all about like the some of the legal implications of time banking, taxes, and suing people and stuff. So that was good. But then it was like, if we're building an alternative economic institution, how do we also build alternative institutions for like actually addressing harm instead of the like legal route of like, okay, something went wrong, let's go they're gonna sue them or something. So it's like thinking about stuff like conflict transformation processes, addressing harm, um, just facilitation around relationships. Like all of those pieces have to be built in to building out a time bank as well. So those are like some of the ideas we're thinking about when we're thinking about safety.
All right, Mary, Christina, I'm gonna give it to you, and I'm gonna close it out.
Now I'm conflicted because there actually also is a question in the chat from someone that had the
Now you got it. Go ahead.
um yeah, I guess just gratitude for the presentation and talking about some of the conundrums, and I look forward to following up. I'm that you don't have to like respond now, but just hoping that you're open to following up about some of these things that I kind of wrestle with from within a nonprofit. Like I was curious, like, do you run it through a nonprofit? I've heard a lot of pluses and minuses to like individuals doing it, through their own like PayPal and the limitations on that, or their own, sorry, GoFundMe's or whatever it is, and then versus like using nonprofits, which seem to be so challenging. And I've read all the Silk materials too, and they're like, yeah, mutual aid is just at odds with what the nonprofit structure was set up to be. So excited to see that you guys have, pushed ahead, and how that could inspire other people working within maybe different, positions. And and I'm sorry I missed the first part of the presentation, so it might have already been addressed. But I guess I'm curious about how you see mutual aid as a structure um, being transformative for a community in ways beyond what exists in just the informal ways that we all, gave examples of. Because we do see it happening all the time, but maybe is it about like breaking beyond the limitations of like you should only be connected to people in your family, or like it only makes sense to help your neighbor? Like, did you see when you create these platforms to kind of bring people together, so like you said, it doesn't have to be the one-to-one trade, um but you can move beyond that, like what do you see it doing for your your community?
Um, I have 100 answers, but I'll just give one. I see a lot of self-empowerment. I always think of this young lady who was at one of the offers and needs markets, and they're just such powerful conversations where people are like stepping into themselves. A lot of people come thinking, I don't have anything to offer. I don't have time. I don't have the energy. I don't have the skills. And like after all of these rounds of like, what are you good at? What like people kind of hyping you up and you being able to sit there and think about what you do have to offer. This one young lady, like during the reflection, she was like, I came here just not thinking I had anything to offer. And now I know I'm the shit, you know? And it was like, yes, you are. And those seeds being cultivated, like that's self-determination, you know? I know I can give to my family, my friends, my community, and it's like, and I'm going to, you know? So I just feel like it starts there. We don't have time to go into all the things. But that was just such a powerful moment for me, for her to talk about the transformation that happened in the moment that you know is gonna go outside of that space.
Would like to add a tiny reflection answer to that too. I think that a lot of some of like the vision or maybe even theory of change behind some of like the mutual aid, um, which is sometimes hard to measure, is a little bit of this idea that the strength that you build through relationships and community and meeting each other's needs is also translated to building power, building political power. And if I mean, a lot of the basis, like when I do other kinds of organizing where we're just trying to like build a campaign, a lot of the times the thing that's like the issue is that people don't know each other and that like people have needs that like stops them from even taking the time to go to like an organizing neighborhood organizing meeting or something. So I think like, I mean, I think it has to be specific. I don't think it magically happens like, oh, you time bank and now you build political power. But I think it's like a really like straightforward way of being like, we all have needs and kind of like brings everyone to the same level. This is where we're starting. Not, because sometimes bringing someone into like a political campaign without that base level of like shared kind of thing is really hard. So I think it's like a really useful way to just be like, we're all starting here. We all have needs. How can we actually help each other? And then that builds, I think, to that other kind of like organizing power. This is, I think, some of the thing that inspires me for the most about the potential that time banking and mutual aid and non-monetary mutual aid has.
Thank you so much for bringing that up because I'm just like trying to, in my mind, like think about the spectrum of like, I'm just all these examples of like how, we all have these neighbor stories and stuff and like just examples I've seen of that. And then like about how my daughter participates a lot in these like online, like Facebook, like everything free groups and buy nothing and stuff. And they kind of have like that vibe, but it's like, what if you could politicize that more because I just think about like because I joined the groups and I'm not as active as her. She's like a low income like parenting student in community college and she has a toddler and she's just always looking for resources and exchanging things and that's really beautiful and it's not something that was around when she was a toddler and I was in the same boat, and she will be on these groups and people will put posts and they'll try to meet each other's needs. And sometimes people will be like, does anyone have any leftover food? I'm like, can't make my paycheck last till Friday or whatever. And then people will be like, oh, like DM me and I can like give you a gift certificate to this restaurant or I can Venmo you money or whatever. So it's not even always just about an offer and exchange. Like it does build those relationships. But then the limitations is like when I went on there when the first announcement about food stamps being cut, like whenever that was back in 2025. And like people were just freaking out. They're like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to find like resources? Like, how are we going to meet our own needs in a community? And I was just like, oh, like they're extracting from us in our taxes like daily. And then now they want to come and tell us that like we can't have food stamps. Like we have to organize each other. Like, how do we have collective action around this? But it just kind of was one post and like people didn't respond and she just went on panicked like where can you find free food and this and that and I'm like guys like we got to get to something and I'm really seeing the potential and I really appreciate that response in the mutual aid and time banking rather than just whatever we might already be participating in that isn't necessarily going to structurally get us out to a solidarity economy.